I had always been fascinated by the stories surrounding the Stanley Hotel, the inspiration for The Shining, a place rumored to be crawling with ghosts. So, naturally, I booked a stay. The hotel was beautiful, but from the moment I stepped inside, something felt off. The air was heavy, the kind of weight that sits on your chest, making it hard to breathe. The hallways stretched long and empty, yet I always felt like I wasn't alone. That first night I barely slept. The room was freezing despite the heater being on full blast. Around 2 in the morning a sound jolted me awake. It was faint at first, a soft melodic tune drifting through the air. My heart pounded as I realized it was piano music. But I was on the 4th floor, far from the ballroom. I got up and slowly opened my door, peering into the dimly lit hallway. The music grew louder, echoing through the halls, though there was no one in sight. I followed the sound down the grand staircase, each step creaking beneath my weight. The music was beautiful, but unsettling, almost hypnotic. When I reached the entrance of the ballroom, the music stopped. The massive room was completely dark. I stood there, breathless, straining my ears for any sign of movement. Then, out of nowhere, the piano let out a single deafening note. I stumbled back, my heart slamming against my ribs. The air turned ice cold, and at that moment I swear I felt something brush past me. I ran back to my room and locked the door, but sleep never came. The next morning I asked the front desk about the music. The clerk only smiled and said, "That's just Flora. She likes to play for our guests." I had heard the stories about Third Bridge, the accidents, the disappearances, the strange noises in the dead of night. I didn't believe them until I went there myself. It was just past midnight when we arrived. The bridge stretched before us, an old wooden structure barely illuminated by our headlights. Beyond it, nothing but open plains and darkness. My friend killed the engine, and for a moment everything was silent. Then a distant thump, thump, thump cut through the night air. It was faint, like a drum beat, growing louder with each second. "Do you hear that?" I whispered. No one answered. My friends sat frozen, their faces pale in the dim glow of the dashboard. The drumming intensified, steady and rhythmic, coming from the fields beyond the bridge. It sounded close now, too close. Then came the screams, faint ghostly wails that sent a chill crawling up my spine. I turned my head sharply toward the trees, and that's when I saw it, a shadow, tall and unmoving, standing just beyond the reach of our headlights. It wasn't just standing there, it was watching. "Drive," I muttered. My friend didn't move. "Drive!" The engine roared to life, and as we sped off the bridge, something slammed against the side of the car, a hard, violent impact that rattled the windows. We didn't stop until we were miles away. The next morning, we checked the car. On the side, near the back door, was a long, deep scratch, as if something with claws had tried to hold us back. I never wanted to believe in ghosts. I always dismissed the stories as exaggerations, tricks of the mind. That changed the night I spent inside the Molly Brown house. It was an opportunity I couldn't pass up, an overnight tour in one of Denver's most famous historic homes. The grand Victorian mansion stood tall against the night sky, its windows dark and vacant. As I stepped inside, a chill immediately ran through me. The air felt thick, almost oppressive, like I had walked into something alive. The tour started harmlessly enough. The guide led us through lavishly decorated rooms filled with antique furniture, polished wood, and faded portraits of long-dead residents. But the deeper we went into the house, the more uneasy I felt. The gas lights flickered, casting strange shadows on the walls. The floors creaked beneath my feet, though sometimes the sound came from places no one was standing. By midnight, most of the group had gone to sleep in their assigned rooms. I had been given a small guest bedroom on the 2nd floor, one that once belonged to a housekeeper. The moment I stepped inside, I felt like I wasn't alone. The room was colder than the rest of the house, and the scent of old perfume lingered in the air, though no one had been inside for hours. I lay in bed, listening to the silence. Then, just past 3 in the morning, I woke up suddenly. At first I didn't know why, then I heard it. Footsteps. slow, deliberate, moving just outside my door. The boards groaned under the weight of something unseen. My breath caught in my throat. I listened, my body paralyzed, as the steps came closer. Then they stopped, right outside my door. I held my breath. Then, click, the doorknob twisted. I shot up in bed, heart hammering. The door never opened, but I could hear breathing, ragged, uneven, just on the other side. The air in the room grew heavy, thick with an energy I couldn't explain. Then came the whispering, a soft, insistent murmur, like a conversation happening just beyond my reach. My stomach turned as I realized I wasn't imagining it. There were two voices. One was a woman, her tone urgent, almost commanding. The other was lower, muffled, like someone responding from a distance. I forced myself to reach for the lamp. My fingers fumbled for the switch, and the second I turned it on, silence. The air shifted, like something had been sucked out of the room. The whispers stopped, the breathing stopped, the footsteps were gone. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning I pulled aside one of the tour guides and hesitantly told her what I had heard. She gave me a knowing look and said, "You're not the first." Apparently guests have long reported hearing a woman's voice in that very room. Many believe it's Molly Brown herself. She had been a strong-willed woman in life, known for giving orders. Maybe in death she was still keeping watch over her home. But the thought that chilled me the most was the second voice I had heard. If the first was Molly, who was she talking to? Cheeseman Park looks peaceful during the day. Lush green grass, towering trees, children laughing as they run through the open fields. But when the sun sets, the air seems to grow thick with something unseen, something watching. If you didn't know its history, you'd never suspect that beneath the perfectly manicured lawns lie thousands of forgotten graves. I had always been skeptical of ghost stories, so when my friend dared me to walk through the park alone at night, I took the challenge without hesitation. At first it was uneventful. The wind rustled the trees and the distant hum of traffic echoed in the background. But then, I heard it. A faint voice. A whisper, barely louder than the wind. I stopped. My breath caught in my throat. The whisper didn't sound like the wind at all. It sounded human. I turned, scanning the empty park. But there was no one there. My heart started pounding as a sense of dread crept over me. Then, the whisper turned into a chorus. Dozens of hushed voices, overlapping, murmuring words I couldn't understand. I quickened my pace, but the whispers followed, growing louder, more insistent. Then, out of the corner of my eye I saw them. Shadows, tall, thin figures shifting in the darkness, their movements slow and unnatural. Some stood motionless, others drifted aimlessly between the trees. My breath hitched as I realized they weren't walking. They were floating. I broke into a sprint, my pulse hammering in my ears. The whispers turned into urgent murmurs, then into full-blown cries. I didn't dare look back. As I neared the park's edge, the temperature plummeted. My fingers went numb, my breath visible in the suddenly freezing air. And then, just as I reached the street light at the park's entrance, the whispers stopped. I stood there panting, my skin covered in goosebumps. Slowly, I turned back. The park was still, silent, the figures were gone. But even now, I can't shake the feeling that they're still there, waiting, watching, whispering. Because when the city decided to build over their graves, they didn't just bury bodies, they buried something else, and it refuses to stay silent. When I checked into the Hotel Colorado, I wasn't thinking about ghosts. I just wanted a quiet weekend away. The building had an old-world charm. Ornate chandeliers, creaky wooden floors, a grand staircase straight out of a classic horror movie. But as soon as I stepped inside, I felt it. A presence. That first night, I struggled to sleep. The room was colder than it should have been, even with the heater on. The silence felt unnatural, like the hotel itself was holding its breath. Around 2 a.m. I woke suddenly, heart pounding, unsure why. Then I heard it. A woman crying. It was faint at first. A soft, sorrowful wail drifting through the air. My stomach tightened as I realized it wasn't coming from another room, it was inside my room. I sat up, my breath shallow, the crying grew louder, turning into sobs, echoing from the corner of the room where the shadows were deepest. I reached for the bedside lamp with trembling fingers. But before I could turn it on, the crying stopped. The silence was deafening. I stayed frozen, listening. Then, tap tap tap. My blood ran cold. The sound came from inside the closet. I forced myself to move, reaching for my phone to use as a flashlight. The beam shook as I aimed it toward the closet door. Slowly, I slid out of bed, my pulse thundering in my ears. The air in the room felt thick, heavy, as if something unseen was pressing down on me. I took a deep breath and yanked the closet door open. Nothing, just an empty closet. But the second I turned away, the crying started again, this time right behind me. I spun around, but there was nothing there. Just as I reached for the door handle to get the hell out of that room, I felt it. A cold breath against my ear. Then a whisper, so close it sent ice through my veins. "Help me." I bolted. I didn't care about my bags, my dignity, nothing. I ran straight to the lobby where the night clerk barely looked surprised to see me. I stammered out what happened, expecting disbelief, but instead he just sighed. "You're not the first," he said. Later I learned the hotel had been used as a hospital during World War II. The crying woman is believed to be the spirit of a nurse who worked there, one who never left. Some say she was heartbroken over a soldier she couldn't save. Others believe she was a patient herself, trapped in suffering even after death. All I know is that her cries still echo through the halls of the Hotel Colorado, and if you stay there, sooner or later, you will hear them.